are going to grab a call. We're going to go down to Florida and talk with Andrew, he, him, who's a theist, who wants to talk with us about some of the a new study, it sounds like, that has to do with atheism. Hey, Andrew, you're talking with Secular Rarity and Jim Barrows. What you got for us?
Hello, gentlemen. My original point was that atheism leads to higher divorce rates than theism.
Okay. Why is that bad?
General point.
Okay. Why is that bad in your eyes? I think that's a great place to start. It's bad because it hurts children. It splits families apart and it hurts children psychologically. How does divorce inherently hurt children? It seems to me that the simple fact of the parents of a child having a marriage certificate is not the most important thing for the health and well-being of that child. It would seem to me that the way that the parents supported and engaged with their child and each other around the child would actually be more what matters.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes, but it's not just a certificate. The way you're defining marriage right now, you're saying it's just a piece of paper. That kind of proves my point.
So what I'm saying is that the difference between a marriage and a divorce is a legal process, right? At the end of the day, you can have all of the things that you would agree are a good marriage without having that piece of paper, which would mean that you would never have the divorce, right? But the divorce is just literally a legal process that tells the government, I'm no longer connected with this person. If what you're describing marriage as is a set of criteria in which two consensual adults engage in particular ways with each other that is positive and beneficial for each other and any offspring from that, then that has nothing to do with divorce. It just doesn't, because all of that can happen without ever going through the process of getting married, which means that divorce just doesn't.
And what is the name of the study? Where is that study? Where can we find it?
Very good question, Jim. Very good question. I know we threw a lot at you, Andrew, but we're gonna answer Jim first, and then anything I said that you want to shout back on, we'd love to hear.
Okay. National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyles. It was published from the Journal of Sex Research. It's called Religiosity, Sex Frequency, and Sexual Satisfaction in Britain.
That's weird that divorce comes up in that.
But yeah, so it's slow that down, because I want to pull it up. Because are you saying that this proves that atheism causes divorce, or is that atheism is linked to divorce? Those are two very different claims that the paper could be making.
I don't know. I didn't hear the second part. The second part.
Is the article claiming that atheism is causal or correlated to divorce?
Neither. The article is saying that Christians have more satisfying sex lives because of their marriages and their views of marriage than non-Christians.
So where is the connection to divorce rates being higher?
Where's the divorce rates is higher?
Like, I'm not saying any of these things that you're saying are necessarily false or true or anything. Right now, I'm just trying to get to the basic understanding of just following the dots here, man. It sounded like you kind of went, here's conclusion number 5, 1, 2, 17, maybe, and then we get to 5. It's just get the through line for us a little bit more clear, please.
Yes, I was getting to that. But Secular Rarity was just trying to define divorce as just a legal process, when I'm strictly talking about the separation aspect of it that harms children. And so, but
you need to tie sexual satisfaction to divorce now, because that's what you started with. The paper you just cited is about sexual satisfaction, not divorce. And the reason I'm asking this is because I'm looking at a study conducted in 2014 by the Pew Research Center that shows that the divorce rate among atheists in the United States is 2%, and among born-again Christians it's 23%, Catholics at 19%, Protestants at 51%, Mormons at 9%, Buddhism is at 10%. So when we're talking about divorce rates, I've got a study here that completely contradicts your claim in the United States. Now, you're talking about England. That's fine. They're two different countries. And so that tells me that atheism has nothing to do with what you're talking about. in terms of divorce rates. So can we stick to the topic of divorce rates?
Sure. The view that most atheists have on divorce, rather on marriage itself, is that it's not a duty. It's just a relationship between two partners. Children can
Yes.
come or not. So my point.
So what? That's exactly. You're right. What's your point? Yeah. You're right. What's your point?
What's wrong with that view? I don't even know that most atheists, most people who would say that they're atheists would accept that view. But like, what is the problem with that view in your eyes?
That it leads to more divorce because you overlook the damage that it does to children. You don't.
Yeah, but do you see how the problem that hang on a second, Andrew. I just muted you for just a second because I really want to point this out. Like, it almost sounds like what you're saying is like it's this point that doesn't actually have a point. It's a point that doesn't actually go anywhere, right? Because you're like, well, a lot of atheists think that like marriage isn't some prescribed duty from some like deity, and it's like, okay, like yeah, maybe that's true. Like, what's the problem? And then your response is, well, then like people are getting divorced. And it's like, yeah, but again, like in the viewpoint that you laid out, the people that you're trying to criticize for doing the thing that you think is a problem, they just don't see it that way, man. Like if somebody agrees with the way that you laid out the definition of marriage, then like when you go to, oh, but if you see marriage like that, you're going to be divorced. They don't care. It doesn't matter because they don't see marriage as this like, you know, sacrosanct thing that we have to all do like you do. If that's how you feel about marriage, though, man, just tell us why that's true. Just tell us how you got to that conclusion and why it should matter for us. Right. Because currently you're basically saying like, hey, Jim, hey, SR, you told me you don't like fried chicken. And we're like, yeah, that's the case. And then you're like, well, if you don't like fried chicken, you won't eat fried chicken. And it's like, well, good. I'm perfectly comfortable with that, man. Like we haven't moved the needle at all.
And not only that, but I've got an article here from the Scientific American written in 2013 titled, "Is Divorce Bad for Children?" I'll cut right to the chase. Yet parents who split have reason for hope. Researchers have found that only a small percentage of children experience serious problems in the wake of divorce or later as adults. In this column, we discuss these findings as well as factors that may protect children from potentially harmful effects of divorce. So not only is it a small percentage of children that have a problem with divorce, we have ways to mitigate that. So parents who care about their children, I'm going to assume all parents do, or most parents do, have ways to mitigate those issues. And so it's a small problem. A much bigger problem is, why in the world should you be unhappy? And wouldn't unhappiness also have a negative effect on children? Mm-hmm. So if you're going to cite children as a problem, one, make sure it's a major problem. It's not. Two, make sure that we don't have any ways to mitigate those issues for children whose parents are going through divorce. And three, you got to show us, so what? People being miserable is not good either. Mm-hmm. And being miserable for your children isn't a good example.
Right.
So...
Now, Andrew, I know we have shouted a lot at you. I still have you on mute. I'm going to unmute you in just a second, but I'm going to give our crew just a second to get our 60-second counter because we're going to give you a full uninterrupted minute, whatever, you know, you want to respond to after what we just said to you. Okay. We want to give you some fair time on this, but yeah, Jim and I are coming from a totally different place on this than you. So help us see that clear through line. Okay. So I'm unmuting you right now. We're going to give you a minute. Go for it, Andrew. Tell us your thoughts.
The way that secularists view sex and marriage and relationships and families is different than the way that religious people view sex, marriage, love, relationships, and family. And I'm saying that the way that religious people view it is healthier for society. Even this study that I cited states that religious people are more satisfied with their sex lives in their marriages, and they have more satisfying relationships and marriages because of the religious attitudes towards sex and marriage. And it's better for children when the parents stay together happily, not unhappily, not abuse, but it's better for the children that both mom and dad live together with them in the home. And my last point is that the more sexual partners you have before getting married, reduces your ability to pair bond, and it hurts the marriage. People that come into marriages with less sexual partners, they're more able to enjoy the marriage because they haven't had a bunch of sex with a bunch of other people. Atheists or seculars, tend to have more sex with more people before marriage.
That's a full minute. And I got to say a couple of things here, man. Again, one, like you started off, I thought really good, where you were like, hey, it tends to be the case that people that aren't religious, people that are secular, atheists, agnostic, non-believers, that stripe of person out there, they don't tend to see, sex and marriage the same way that religious people do. I completely agree with you. Just 100% on that. That seems clear to me too. Again, where I find the problem is that you just started listing all of these things afterwards, but like you never really gave us anything. You said like divorce hurts children, but again, my question is how, where, what is the actual tangible harm? And I think if you and I hashed it out for the next 20 minutes, which, we probably don't have the time to do, but if we really did, what we'd come to find is that the things that are affecting the child's development and well-being overall, the things that are negatively influencing that is going to be related to, like, just to put it simply, shitty actions, right? Or not giving a damn about the child in a supportive way, So like, for instance, let's say two people get divorced and they constantly tell the child the other parent is a horrible, horrible, terrible person. Hate them, hate them, hate them. Yeah, that's a bad thing. But you know what's crazy is that you don't have to have divorce to have that, man. Like, that happens just the same in marriage. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, the thing that seems to tip the scale either way isn't about being married or divorced. It's about a set of criteria. It's about a set of actions that the guardians either do or do not take when it comes to raising this child. And so again, I don't see how somebody maintaining a marriage, especially as Jim has pointed out, there are lots of very unhappy people in marriages who do not get a divorce specifically because their religion says not to. How is that a better environment for the child than one where the child now has, let's say, two separate households that is entirely loving and supportive? I just don't see where the marriage and divorce thing comes into it. And then you've also brought up, and then I'll shut up and kick it over to you and Jim, but you also brought up like happiness in terms of like sex in a marriage. And I don't have any data for this, but I feel pretty confident that like we didn't fuck super well isn't the number one reason that people get divorced. I would imagine it's lower on the list.
It's money. It's number one's money.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, you reiterated your point, which we already dealt with. You said again, it's kids, implying all kids, I'm assuming. I came up with data that showed that it's not all kids. In fact, it's a minor number of them that have long-lasting effects. Not only is it a small number of them that do, we also have ways to mitigate that and make sure that that doesn't happen. So we could effectively say it is not all kids, given parents who care and are willing to take those steps. So your points are refuted on that. Your study, I don't believe, is causal, and you're claiming causal. You're saying that atheism causes bad sex. Well, no, I think that's a correlation study, in which case, okay, you got a lot of work to do causal. And if that study is only relying on people to correctly report their actions, then that study is not a super good study to base anything off of. It's a really good study to go find more research to do and to get into more areas and do more research like that. But to base something along the lines of atheism is bad because it causes bad sex, that's just ridiculous. As for atheism and divorce, which is what you were calling about, again, my Pew Center research trumps yours because you haven't provided any evidence for your claims that atheism is bad for marriage, especially when I'm looking at this Pew research done in 2014 that says 2% of atheists end up in divorce in the United States, whereas 51% of Protestants, 19% of Catholics, and 33% of born-again Christians end up in divorce. So none of your points are standing right now because you haven't brought any evidence to support them.
What's your response? What you got, Andrew? Andrew, you still there? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
You dismissed my study without even really looking at it, and I can just do the same for your studies. So
no, I looked at your study. Your study is correlational. It's not causal.
Yeah, Jim actually pulled it up.
Yeah, you're claiming causal. Atheism causes bad sex.
Right.
That's not the case. It's correlated. Correlation is not causation. So you can't say it's cause. You can only say it's correlated. You're making a much stronger case than exists.
And then again, also, Andrew, like, I still haven't heard anything in this study that you're talking about that has to do with divorce. I've heard atheists don't fuck well, which, hey, maybe that's the case, man. But I can honestly tell you, in the last decade of my life, as I've gotten away from religion, I've definitely had much better sexual encounters. Now, that's a personal experience, and we often say personal experiences aren't the proof there for the truth of it universally. But again, I'm lost because I don't see the connection that you're trying to make. And I think you're trying to make certain connections that have been just kind of mundane, everyday in the water talking points that people have said for literally millennia. It's surprising. But if you go back 700 years in human history, hell, if you go back 7,000 years in human history, there seems to be some people going around saying things like family. It's a good thing, and that on its face isn't a problem, right? That isn't the issue. Myself and Jim aren't going to be standing up for just people just constantly not having close connections with, people that they care about. That's what a family is just people who choose to come together and give a shit about each other, right? And if you have that, whether or not you're married doesn't matter. Whether or not you're in a cis heterosexual relationship doesn't matter. You can have one parent or 5 parents. None of that matters, because at the end of the day, the thing that is the most important is the love and support that you show for each other, right? Especially for a child, especially for someone who's not able to fully take care of themselves and navigate this world. So it's confusing to me why specifically being in this prescribed union and nothing else is somehow, I don't know, honestly, just magical. I just don't know. I truly don't. I don't see the connection there. And I'd love it if you could just one more time for us, just help us understand that. Okay. We've already been on the call for almost 20 minutes, and we got a bunch of other really good calls too, so we're gonna let you go in just a minute. But yeah, if you could, man, one more time for us, Andrew. What is that connection? What is it specifically about being married, not getting a divorce, that really, really just tips it over the top of that mountain and makes people that much better? What is it?
It is a safeguard, an extra layer of protection to keep the family together, and more of an incentive for parents to stay together and not break up, not have a breakup mentality. If you don't divorce just because the relationship isn't going well, overall, it's better for the child, for mom and dad who biologically birthed them, to stay together happily.
Is it ever acceptable to have a divorce? You said you don't just get a divorce because the relationship isn't going well, which again, don't have the data in front of me, but would feel very confident in expressing that that's probably not in the top few, right? But is there a point at all where the relationship is going bad, where it is acceptable in your eyes, or should just people never, ever, ever get a divorce?
Abuse. abuse.
Okay,
is a
well, that's
legitimate
cool.
reason for
I'm super glad you said that, man, because like, yeah, yeah, glad you said that. So
yeah, at least that.
yeah,
But again, if two people are unhappy, then what they're doing is mirroring for their children that it's okay to be unhappy.
Yes.
Do you think that's healthy?
No, it's not healthy. I prefer that they do.
Okay, so would you agree that divorce, when two people are unhappy with being each other, divorce in that case is a good thing, so that they're not teaching children that being unhappy is a good thing?
Most of the time, no. Sometimes, yes. Maybe.
Wow.
Do you kind of see what Jim and I here are getting at, man? Is because like it kind of seems like every single time we poke a little at these statements that you've brought us, like it very quickly steps away from the strictly married, divorced, problem, and it starts getting into all of these other things that Jim was talking about, all these other mitigating factors that are like completely obvious to so many people. Child psychologists have been studying for decades and decades. Like, we have lots and lots of data. And so ultimately it's just like, it kind of seems like you're defeating your own point here, Andrew, because you keep coming back to these things that, again, myself and Jim, totally agree with. You're like, no, if people are abusing each other in relationships, yeah, they should get a divorce. And it's like, well, yeah, but then doesn't that go against your thing? Because you're the one that's saying there's something inherent to marriage and divorce itself. But it sounds like in reality, you do kind of the same game that we do, which is you look at a situation and you look at the overall benefit or harm that's happening. You look at well-being of everybody involved in this relationship, just like we do. And if that's the game you're playing, awesome, man. Jump on in. The water's fine. We've all been playing it for years on this side, and we want you to join us because I truly do believe that's the correct way, as opposed to just saying, honestly, a piece of paper is what causes people to be better or worse. But Andrew, I know we've had you on for a bit. I know we've shouted a bunch of things at you, man. But we are going to let you go today, get to some of these other great calls. I thought this was a fantastic call, Andrew. And I really, really hope you call us back in the future. We were able to challenge each other, but I think we were all pretty damn respectful. So thanks so much for that, Andrew. Seriously, it means a lot to us. But